It was supposed to be routine, a custody hearing in a sunlit county courtroom. But what happened inside those beige-painted walls spread far beyond the courthouse steps. A judge leaned back in his polished chair, smirked tugging the corner of his lips, and said to a woman standing at the witness stand, "You think the world owes you something because you've had a hard life? Maybe if you worked harder, you wouldn't be standing here begging for help." The courtroom went still. The mother's hands trembled on the edge of the podium. Her cheeks burned, not just from humiliation, but from anger she fought hard to swallow. The judge chuckled, then tapped his gavel like it was a punchline. What no one in that room knew was that the mother he mocked had someone watching her back, a powerful ally, someone with enough reach to flip this story upside down. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't just be the judge's reputation on trial. The county of Maplewood was a place caught between past and present. Rows of small businesses lined Main Street. The diner where retirees played dominoes, the old movie theater with its flickering marquee, the pawn shop that seemed to survive every economic crash. At the far end of town stood the courthouse, a squat 1960s-era building of brick and glass, more bureaucratic than majestic. Inside, sunlight poured through tall windows, highlighting every scuff on the tile floors and every wrinkle in the American flag hanging above the judge's bench. It was here that Elena Martinez, 34 years old, mother of two, came seeking something simple, a fair hearing. Elena wasn't wealthy. She wasn't politically connected. She worked double shifts at a nursing home, cleaning bedpans and mopping floors, while still managing school drop-offs and homework checks. She wore second-hand shoes and carried folders stuffed with documents, pay stubs, attendance charts, character references. Her crime? None. Her battle? Custody of her children. After a bitter separation from her ex-husband, Daniel. The court wasn't supposed to be about mockery. It was supposed to be about justice. Judge Daniel Whitaker, 62, had sat on the Maplewood bench for over 20 years. He was known for his silver hair, piercing blue eyes, and the sideways smirk he often gave defendants who displeased him. He prided himself on being old school, a man who believed poverty was a personal failure, not a systemic problem. Colleagues whispered that Whitaker enjoyed the power a little too much. He would toy with litigants, making them squirm before issuing rulings that left little room for appeal. His defenders said he was simply tough, that he ran his courtroom with discipline. But discipline is not the same as dignity. And dignity was exactly what he stripped from Elena that day. Court transcripts later captured it in sterile lines, but the live moment was electric. Elena had just finished explaining how she juggled 2 jobs, barely slept, but still made sure her children got to school with clean clothes and packed lunches. She admitted she fell behind on rent once, but explained she caught up within 2 months. That's when Whitaker leaned back, took off his glasses, and said with a sneer, "Ms. Martinez, you made a series of poor life choices. You chose to marry the wrong man. You chose to work jobs that don't pay enough. And now you want this court to fix it for you. Perhaps if you spent less time playing the victim and more time working, you wouldn't be here." Gasps filled the courtroom. Even the clerk looked down at her desk, lips pressed tight. Elena froze. Every instinct told her to stay silent, to take the humiliation. But something inside her shifted. Her voice, steady but low, answered, "Your Honor, you don't know me, and you don't know who stand with me." What happened next turned private pain into public scandal. A spectator in the gallery, a college student there for jury duty orientation, had recorded the exchange on his phone. By the afternoon, the clip was on social media. By evening, it had been shared tens of thousands of times. "Judge mock single mom," the captions read. Some commenters called Whitaker a bully. Others said he was telling hard truths. But the overwhelming sentiment was outrage, because Elena wasn't just any woman. She symbolized countless mothers clawing their way through poverty, juggling jobs, surviving systems stacked against them, and seeing her mocked by a man in robes struck a nerve. Elena returned home that night to find her phone buzzing with messages. Among them was one that made her stop cold. It was from Jared Cole, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, who happened to be her older brother. To the world, Jared was an unassuming federal agent, a career man at the Department of Justice with years of experience in corruption cases. To Elena, he was simply her protector, the brother who once walked her to school after bullies pushed her down, the man who never stopped believing in her. Jared's text was short, almost surgical. I saw the clip. Don't worry. I'm coming home. On the surface, the scandal seemed like a morality play. Arrogant judge versus struggling mother. But as Jared began to dig, another layer emerged. Judge Whitaker wasn't just cruel. He was compromised. Court records showed patterns. Mothers losing custody disproportionately under his rulings. Fathers with shady connections walking away with favorable decisions, fines and fees stacking against the poor. Whispers of kickbacks floated in lawyer circles. Unprovable but persistent. Developers whose cases landed in his court suddenly acquired cheap properties. Bail bondsmen seemed unusually lucky when appearing before him. Jared's instinct screamed. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was systemic. For Elena, the humiliation was raw. She replayed the moment in her mind, wondering if she had said too much or too little. Shame bled into rage and rage into fear, not just for herself, but for her children. What future did they have if a man like Whitaker controlled their lives? For Whitaker, the scandal was infuriating. How dare the public question him? How dare this woman embarrass him by going viral? In private, he muttered to colleagues that entitlement culture was destroying respect for authority. For Jared, it was fuel. He knew power didn't topple easily, but he also knew corruption cracks under pressure when light shines in. And he had every intention of flooding Whitaker's world with daylight. Jared drove into Maplewood the next morning, unmarked car rolling past the courthouse where protesters already gathered with signs. Justice, not judgment. Respect mothers. Accountability now. He didn't wear his DOJ badge on his belt that day. He didn't need to. He carried something heavier, a sister's pain, and a growing suspicion that Judge Whitaker's cruelty wasn't just personality. It was camouflage. Jared began quietly interviewing courthouse staff, lawyers, even janitors. He asked about patterns, about whispers, about cases that didn't add up. And slowly, pieces began to surface. Whitaker's rulings weren't just harsh. They were profitable for someone. On the third day of digging, Jared sat in a diner booth, flipping through old court ledgers. That's when a shadow fell across his table. A man in a gray suit slid into the booth across from him. His smile was cold. His words colder. You're Jared Cole, aren't you? DOJ man. Elena's brother. I'd be careful if I were you. This town protects its own. Jared's hand tightened on his coffee mug. He didn't blink. The man leaned closer. Some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered. Then he slid a folded paper across the table. Jared unfolded it and froze. It was a photograph. Elena's children, standing in their schoolyard. The message was clear. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. It was about survival. Jared Cole's hand hovered over the photograph like it might burn him. His niece and nephew smiled innocently at the camera, backpacks slung over their shoulders, unaware that someone had been watching them, stalking them. The man in the gray suit leaned back, tapping the table with two fingers, calm as a chess player. You want to dig? Dig. But know this, Judge Whitaker isn't the only one with friends. Maplewood is a small town. Outsiders who come poking around, they don't last long. Jared's jaw flexed, but he stayed silent. He had learned long ago that silence unsettled men who thought threats were power. The man finally stood, straightened his tie, and left. Jared slipped the photo into his jacket. The message was crystal clear. Whitaker's arrogance wasn't just a personal flaw. He was being shielded by something larger and dirtier. Outside the courthouse, protests swelled. What began as a handful of signs carried by local mothers now drew crowds. Television vans parked along Main Street. Antennas pointed skyward. Elena deserves justice, a young college activist shouted into a megaphone. How many more families have been crushed by this man's gavel? Elena tried to stay out of the spotlight, but reporters hounded her everywhere. She gave one brief statement. I don't want pity. I want fairness. For me, for my children, and for every parent who's been belittled instead of heard. The clip spread quickly. Hashtags trended. Donations poured into a GoFundMe to help with her legal fees. And Judge Whitaker? He seethed. He called the protesters ungrateful children. He told colleagues that social media mobs were trying to cancel him. But in the quiet moments, when cameras weren't rolling, he felt something else creep into his chest. Fear. Jared had worked corruption cases before. Local sheriffs running drugs. City clerks embezzling funds. Even a mayor who sold construction contract for kickbacks. The pattern was always the same. Small abuses, tolerated long enough, became pipelines for bigger crimes. He knew Whitaker wasn't acting alone. Judges don't usually mock mothers for sport without the confidence of protection. Someone benefited from his rulings. Someone was feeding the machine. Jared started with the basics. He cross-referenced Whitaker's rulings with property transactions. He examined custody cases where one parent inexplicably won, despite evidence to the contrary. He pulled campaign donations, even though Whitaker hadn't faced a serious challenger in years. And slowly, threads began to appear. One name popped up repeatedly. Martin Keene, a local real estate developer. Keene had acquired at least a dozen foreclosed homes at suspiciously low prices, all tied to cases that had passed through Whitaker's courtroom. While Jared chased leads, Elena struggled with the immediate fallout. Her children, Sophia and Mateo, came home from school in tears. "Mom," Sophia whispered, "the kid said Grandpa judges and takes away because you're poor." Elena hugged her tightly, fighting tears. "No one's taking you anywhere. You're mine. Always mine." But deep down, fear gnawed. She had seen mothers lose custody for less. She had seen how Whitaker wielded his gavel like a blade. Every night, after the kids were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table, paper spread before her, wondering how much longer she could hold on. Jared arranged a quiet meeting with a courthouse clerk, a woman who had worked under Whitaker for 15 years. She was nervous, her hands trembling around a cup of coffee. "Martin Keene comes by the judge's chamber sometimes," she whispered. "Never officially. But he and the judge, they talk like old friends. Cases come in, and suddenly Keene knows which properties are about to foreclose. It's like magic." Jared leaned in. "And no one reports this?" She shook her head quickly. "This town, people don't talk. We've all seen what happens when someone crosses Whitaker. Jobs disappear. Loans dry up. It's easier to stay quiet." Jared nodded slowly. Fear was the true currency of corruption, and Maplewood was rich in it. Whitaker, alone in his chambers, stared at his reflection in the glass. He had always believed himself untouchable. The robe made him invincible. But now, cracks were forming. He replayed Elena's words in his mind. "You don't know who stands with me." That line haunted him. He wondered who was pulling her strings. He didn't know Jared yet, not fully, but he knew someone was stirring trouble. And Whitaker's greatest fear wasn't exposure. It was humiliation. For men like him, power was less about money and more about image. And his image, once pristine, was starting to crumble. Jared's investigation wasn't smooth. For every lead, there were misdirections. A tip suggested Whitaker was funneling money through a local charity. Jared dug, only to find it was legitimate. A food bank run by nuns, clean books, no corruption. Another rumor claimed Whitaker had ties to organized crime. Jared chased it for weeks, only to learn it was based on a single dinner years ago with a cousin of a suspected mobster. Each dead and frustrated him. But he knew red herrings were part of the game. Someone wanted him wasting time. One afternoon, Elena sat in her lawyer's office, listening to strategy. Her attorney, a young woman named Priya Singh, advised patience. "We'll appeal if Whitaker rules against you. Public opinion is on your side. That matters." But Elena shook her head. "I'm tired of patience. I'm tired of men like him deciding my worth. If I have to stand up in that courtroom again, I will not bow my head." Priya studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Good. Because a mother who fights is harder to silence than any lawyer." Jared finally struck gold. A whistleblower, a junior lawyer who had once clerked under Whitaker, reached out anonymously. The lawyer claimed Whitaker had been altering foreclosure schedules, delaying or accelerating cases to ensure King got first pick on properties. The lawyer provided copies of internal memos, complete with Whitaker's signature. It was damning. Jared's pulse quickened. He finally had something solid, not just whispers, but evidence. The moment Jared moved to corroborate the documents, the pushback began. His car was vandalized overnight, windshield smashed, tires slashed. A dead crow was left on the hood, a crude but chilling warning. Elena's mailbox was stuffed with anonymous letters. Drop the case. Think of your kids. Even Priya Singh received a call in the middle of the night, a voice whispering, "Lawyers who cross Whitaker don't stay lawyers for long." Maplewood wasn't just protecting Whitaker. It was suffocating anyone who challenged him. National outlets picked up the story. Headlines screamed, "Judge mocks mother. Faces scrutiny over ties to developer. DOJ agent investigates small-town corruption. Retaliation ensues." Whitaker doubled down. In an interview with a local paper, he dismissed the allegations as theatrics. "I've served this community for decades. I don't answer to mobs. I answer to the law." But in private, his calls to King grew more frantic. And King, usually calm, began to show cracks. "Keep control of your courtroom," he hissed. "If you fall, we all fall." Maplewood split into two camps. One camp rallied behind Elena, seeing her as a symbol of resilience. They organized rallies, brought casseroles to her house, slipped notes of encouragement under her door. The other camp defended Whitaker, claiming he was a victim of cancel culture. They accused Elena of exaggerating, of being a pawn for her powerful brother. The tension seeped into schools, churches, even the diner where Jared had once been threatened. Conversations ended in shouting. Neighbors turned cold. This was no longer just about a judge and a mother. It was about who owned the story of justice. Jared knew the case was reaching a boiling point. The evidence was strong but fragile. One leak, one destroyed document, one intimidated witness, and the whole thing could collapse. So he set a trap. He leaked a false lead through a trusted source, that he was about to arrest a local banker connected to Whitaker. Within 24 hours, the banker's office was mysteriously cleaned out, files shredded, hard drives wiped. It was proof someone inside the courthouse was feeding information to Whitaker's camp. The mole wasn't just real. They were close. Late one evening, Jared returned to Elena's house. The kids were asleep, Elena exhausted on the couch. He set his briefcase down, finally ready to breathe. Then his phone buzzed. An encrypted message. No sender. Just 6 words. "Look outside. They're already here." Jared's stomach dropped. He moved to the window, peered through the blinds. Across the street, under the flicker of a streetlight, a black SUV idled. Its engine hummed. And in the back seat, through tinted glass, Jared swore he saw the outline of Judge Whitaker himself, watching. Jared's breath fogged the window pane as he stared out at the black SUV idling beneath the streetlight. Its tinted glass reflected the glow of the lamp, masking whoever sat inside. But Jared's instinct screamed the shape was familiar, broad-shouldered, leaning back with that smug posture. Judge Whitaker. Jared's first impulse was to grab his service weapon. His second was to wake Elena, usher her children out the back, get them safe. But training won over panic. He shut the curtain, exhaled, and dialed a trusted DOJ contact. No answer. Straight to voicemail. The SUV's headlights blinked twice. Then the engine revved, tires crunching softly over asphalt. It rolled slowly down the block, as if taunting him, daring him to follow. Jared didn't. Not yet. But he knew this wasn't a bluff. It was a message. "I see you. I can reach you." And Whitaker wasn't alone. The next morning, Elena stumbled into the kitchen to find Jared at the table. Paper spread before him, eyes bloodshot. "You didn't sleep?" she said softly. "Didn't need to," he replied. He slid the photograph of her children across the table. "This isn't just about you anymore. They've made about the kids." Elena's knees buckled. She gripped the counter, steadying herself. "Jared, I can't let them grow up like this. Constant fear, watching shadows. Maybe I should drop it." Jared cut her off. "No, That's what they want. They win by scaring you into silence. You survived too much to let them strip you of this now. She stared at him, voice breaking. And what if they take the kids anyway? What if I fight and lose? Jared reached across the table, gripping her hand firmly. Then we fight smarter. We take the battle to them. And this time, we don't play by their rules. Priya Singh, Elena's lawyer, arrived that afternoon with fresh news. She closed the blinds before speaking, her face drawn. Jared, I got word from a colleague at the courthouse. Whitaker's pushing to fast-track Elena's custody hearing, as soon as next week. Elena's chest tightened. Next week? That's impossible. We haven't even finished preparing evidence. That's the point, Priya said. He wants you cornered. He wants you to fail in front of a crowd. Jared narrowed his eyes. And he's accelerating this because he feels heat. If he thinks exposure is coming, he'll try to discredit Elena first. Make her look unstable, unfit, emotional. Typical playbook. Priya nodded grimly. We need leverage before that hearing. Solid proof that forces him to step back, or forces higher courts to intervene. Jared's lips pressed into a hard line. Then it's time we find Keene. Martin Keene was Maplewood's golden developer, or so the brochure said. He built affordable housing units, donated to local charities, sponsored a little lead team. His photo hung at the Chamber of Commerce. Round face, thinning sandy hair, forced smile of a man who loved being in pictures. But Jared knew the type. Men who wrap corruption in philanthropy. He parked across from Keene's downtown office, a modest building with glass doors etched with Keene properties. Elena sat beside him, reluctant but resolute. Why am I here? She asked. Because you're the one he underestimates, Jared said. You're a struggling mother, not a federal agent. If anyone can catch him off guard, it's you? Elena swallowed hard. And if he catches on? Jared's eyes darkened. Then I step in. Inside Keene's office, the air smelled faintly of coffee and new carpet. Keene sat behind a wide desk, gold watch glinting. He smiled politely at Elena, though his eyes flicked suspiciously toward Jared. Ms. Martinez, Keene said, feigning warmth, I've heard of your case. Very unfortunate. How can I help? Elena's voice wavered at first, but grew steadier. You could start by telling me why you and Judge Whitaker talk so much about properties that don't belong to you. Families lose their homes, and somehow you're always waiting with cash in hand. Why is that? Keene's smile froze. His eyes flicked to Jared, then back. Careful, Ms. Martinez. Rumors are dangerous things. Jared leaned forward. So are paper trails. And I've seen enough of them to know you're not just lucky. You've been tipped off. By Whitaker. Keene's jaw clenched. His hands tightened on the desk. You don't know what you're getting into. Walk away, both of you. Elena leaned forward, voice steel now. I already tried walking away. Now I'm standing. For a long moment, silence crackled. Then Keene chuckled, cold and joyless. If you think you can take down Whitaker, you're fools. He's just one piece of the board. You don't even see the rest. Word of Elena confronting Keene leaked, though no one knew how. Some locals applauded her courage. Others whispered she was stirring trouble she couldn't control. Maplewood felt like a pressure cooker. At the diner, arguments broke out between neighbors. Church sermons hinted at corruption without naming names. Even children carried the tension. Sophia came home in tears after a classmate shouted, Your mom's going to jail. Elena comforted her. But each word fell hollow. The battle wasn't just legal anymore. It was cultural. That night, Jared combed through financial filings again. He found something he hadn't noticed before. Keene's company had made unusually large consulting payments to an entity called Silverwood Holdings. The payment aligned perfectly with Whitaker's rulings in certain foreclosure cases. Silverwood Holdings wasn't registered in Maplewood. It wasn't even registered in the state. It was offshore. Jared's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a local scam. It was a pipeline, Maplewood Properties feeding into a larger laundering scheme. And Whitaker wasn't the mastermind. He was a cog. Whitaker slammed his hand against his desk hard enough to rattle the gavel. They're digging too close, he shouted into the phone. Keen, you idiot! Why did you let them walk into your office? On the other end, Keen's voice trembled. They blindsided me, but they don't have proof. Whitaker cut him off. Proof or not, perception matters. And right now, the perception is that I'm losing control. That can't happen. He hung up, chest heaving. In his decades on the bench, Whitaker had never felt this cornered. The robe had always shielded him. But robes tear when dragged through mud. 2 days later, Priya Singh was driving home when a black pickup swerved, forcing her onto the shoulder. The driver's window rolled down. A man with a buzz cut and scarred jawline leaned out. "Drop the case, lady," he snarled. "Or next time we don't miss." Then he sped off, leaving dust and fear in his wake. Priya sat trembling behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. She called Jared immediately. "They're escalating," Jared muttered after hearing her account, "which means we're closer than ever." The intimidation campaign ramped up. Elena's landlord received a call suggesting he evict her for his own safety. Jared's car was tailed constantly by different vehicles, rotating to avoid suspicion. Priya's office window was smashed overnight, a brick wrapped with a note. "Back off." Fear clawed at them, but so did resolve. Elena taped the brick's note to her fridge as a reminder. "If they're this desperate," she told Jared, "it means they know we're winning." A breakthrough came from an unlikely place. An elderly janitor from the courthouse approached Jared quietly. His name was Mr. Lewis, 72 years old, bent with arthritis but sharp-eyed. "I've seen Whitaker meet Keen after hours," Lewis whispered. "Documents changing hands. Sometimes envelopes. I never said anything because, well, who'd listen to a janitor?" Jared leaned in. "I'm listening now. Would you testify?" Lewis hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If it helps a young mother, yes. But you'd better protect me. Those men, they don't play fair." Jared devised a plan. With DOJ resources, he arranged a sting operation. They let Whitaker think he was safe. Let him conduct one more shady transaction with Keen. This time, they record everything. The operation was set for Friday afternoon. Cameras hidden, audio wired. Lewis would give the signal when Whitaker and Keen entered the private chambers. It was risky, but it could be the smoking gun. Friday came. The courthouse bustled with routine hearings. Protesters still lined the sidewalk, chanting, holding signs. Inside, Whitaker presided as if nothing was amiss, gavel in hand, smirk on his lips. By late afternoon, Lewis whispered into the recorder. "They're here." Jared, listening from a surveillance van outside, tightened his grip on his headset. The feed crackled, voices inside the chamber. Keen's laugh, papers shuffling. Whitaker's low growl. Then silence. The feed went dead. "Lost audio," an agent shouted. Jared's stomach dropped. Inside the courthouse, a loud crash echoed. Shouts. Running footsteps. Jared burst from a van, sprinting toward the courthouse doors. He knew what the crash meant before he even got inside. When he reached the chamber, the door was ajar. Papers littered the floor. The recorder was smashed. And Mr. Lewis, the janitor who had dared to speak, was gone. The courthouse chamber was chaos. Papers strewn like leaves in autumn. Recorder smashed beyond repair. The faint smell of cologne and sweat still lingering. Jared's eyes darted across the mess, his pulse a hammer in his throat. Mr. Lewis, the one man brave enough to speak, had vanished without a trace. Agents swept the hallways, but by the time they reached the exits, the crowd of protesters outside had surged forward, chanting. Dozens of bodies, hundreds of faces. Anyone could have slipped through with an old man in tow. Jared clenched his fists. They'd been one step away from the smoking gun. Now, they had nothing but silence, and the gnawing knowledge that Whitaker's reach extended farther than anyone had admitted. That evening, Jared broke the news to Elena at her kitchen table. She gripped her coffee cup so tightly her knuckles blanched. "They took him," she whispered. Jared nodded grimly. "He was our witness. He risked everything, and now he's gone." Elena's eyes shimmered with tears. "So what happens now? They just erase people? Like they don't matter?" Jared leaned forward, his voice steady but sharp. That's exactly how corruption wins. By making people feel small, disposable. But Lewis isn't gone forever. Someone saw something, and I'll find them. Elena swallowed hard. Her voice, though shaking, carried steel. Then I'll stand for him. If they silence Lewis, I'll testify myself. I'll tell them everything. What Whitaker said, how he mocked me, how he treated me like I was nothing. Jared stared at her, proud and afraid all at once. You realize that makes you a target. I already am, she said. In his chambers, Whitaker poured a glass of bourbon. Staring out at the courthouse parking lot, Keen sat across from him, tie loosened, face pale. You're losing control, Keen muttered. Whitaker's smirk faltered. Control is perception. As long as I wear the robe, I own the gavel. And that mother Elena? She thinks public opinion will save her. But courts don't run on opinion. They run on rulings. Keen leaned forward, then crush her at the hearing. Whitaker's eyes glinted cold. Oh, I will. She'll walk out of that courtroom humiliated, unfit in the eyes of the law. And her brother? He'll watch me dismantle her life piece by piece. Priya Singh, already shaken from the pickup truck incident, doubled down on her preparation. She lined her office walls with case notes, sticky tabs, photographs, and precedents. Elena, she said, pacing as they strategized, we can't just play defense. We need to go on the offensive. Show Whitaker for what he is. Elena frowned. But how? He's a judge. He holds the power. Priya stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing. That's the point. His bias, his cruelty, his history of questionable rulings. We use all of it. Every recorded word, every social media clip, every affidavit. If he tries to humiliate you, we'll turn it back on him. Elena nodded, a spark of hope flickering. Then let him laugh. This time, the world will be watching. As the custody hearing approached, Maplewood fractured further. Churches held prayer vigils for truth, though its truth depended on who you asked. At the diner, arguments ended with shoves. One evening, graffiti appeared on the courthouse steps. Whitaker equals corrupt. By morning, it had been scrubbed clean. Meanwhile, Elena's face appeared on posters. Some reading Mother Courage, others defaced with the word liar. The tension wasn't just legal anymore. It was cultural. Whitaker represented the old guard. Elena represented change. And the town was at war with itself. Late one night, Jared traced Silverwood Holdings again, buried in the offshore web. He found a pattern of shell companies that funneled back to the U.S., specifically to a law firm in Chicago known for estate planning. Jared knew better. Estate planning was often a cover for laundering. One name surfaced in the documents. Charles Danforth, senior partner at the firm, a man with political connections stretching into state and federal levels. Jared leaned back, realization sinking in. Whitaker wasn't the top of the chain. He was a pawn in a far bigger game. But pawns could be sacrificed. And Jared feared Whitaker was desperate enough to burn everything to the ground before falling. The morning of the custody hearing dawned bright and deceptively calm. Protesters filled the courthouse lawn, holding handmade signs. Reporters clustered near the steps, cameras poised. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Elena sat at the table beside Priya, her hands clenched tight. Jared sat behind them, eyes sharp, scanning the gallery for threats. Whitaker entered last, robe flowing, gavel in hand. His smirk was back, but thinner now, tighter at the edges. All rise, the bailiff announced. The hearing began. Whitaker wasted no time. His questions came sharp, dripping with condescension. Ms. Martinez, do you consider it responsible parenting to work 2 jobs and still fall behind on rent? Do you consider stability when your children see you exhausted every night? Elena's throat tightened, but she steadied herself. I consider it strength to provide for my children, your honor. They have food, clothes, love, and safety because I work myself to the bone for them. Whitaker chuckled darkly. Or perhaps they have instability because you made poor choices. Choices that brought you here, begging this court to clean up your mess. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Jared's fists clenched behind her. Priya stood quickly. Objection, Your Honor. Bias and unprofessional conduct on the record. Whitaker's smirk widened. Overruled. Elena's pulse thundered, but she drew strength from Jared's steady gaze in the gallery. She leaned forward, voice unwavering now. You can call me irresponsible. You can call me poor. But you cannot call me unfit. My children know love, discipline, and sacrifice. And if you mock me for that, it says more about you than it does about me. The gallery erupted, whispers, nods, murmurs of agreement. Whitaker slammed his gavel. Order, order in the court. But the image was already seared. A mother refusing to bow her head to the man in the robe. In a hallway outside, Martin Keene watched coverage of the hearing on his phone, sweat beading his forehead. The public was turning. Elena wasn't breaking. She was rising. He dialed Whitaker frantically. This is backfiring. You have to shut her down harder. Whitaker's voice crackled through the line. I'll do more than that. By the time I'm finished, she'll be broken beyond repair. Keene swallowed hard. He had hitched his empire to Whitaker's arrogance. And for the first time, he feared the gavel might fall on them both. That night, Jared received an encrypted email from an unknown sender. Attached were scanned copies of courthouse memos, foreclosure schedules altered in Whitaker's handwriting, property lists marked with Keene's initials. The subject line read, Insurance, don't waste it. Jared forwarded the documents to DOJ headquarters immediately, but his gut twisted. If someone inside was leaking against Whitaker, it meant factions were forming, and factions made things volatile. The next day, Elena returned to court for round 2. The gallery buzzed. Reporters scribbled. Cameras flashed outside. Whitaker entered, robe swaying, but his smirk was gone. His eyes were cold, hard. Before we resume, he announced, this court has reviewed new information regarding Ms. Martinez. Evidence suggesting fraud and misconduct. Elena's breath caught. Priya shot up from her chair. What evidence? Whitaker lifted a folder. Anonymous but credible. Documents indicating Ms. Martinez misused funds from her employer. Theft. The gallery gasped. Cameras clicked. Elena's face went white. Jared leapt to his feet, fury blazing. He hadn't seen those documents before. Whitaker's gavel slammed. Until this is resolved, custody will be temporarily suspended. Elena's world spun. Her children's faces flashed before her eyes. Jared's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced down. A new encrypted message glowed on the screen. You want the truth? Meet me tonight. Alone. The children depend on it. The encrypted email weighed heavy in Jared's mind. He traced the sender's path, but the VPN trail looped endlessly, crafted by someone who knew how to cover their tracks. Alone. That word burned. It was bait, no doubt, but if there was even a chance it led to evidence strong enough to topple Whitaker and free Elena from the false charges, Jared had no choice. He slipped his badge into his pocket, strapped his holster tight, and left Elena's house under cover of quiet. The rendezvous point was an abandoned textile mill at the edge of Maplewood, its broken windows glowing faintly under the pale wash of moonlight. Jared parked a block away, boots crunching on gravel as he approached. Inside, shadows stretched across the vast, empty floor. A single light bulb flickered near the back office. A man stood waiting, tall, gaunt, in a cheap suit. His voice cracked as he spoke. My name doesn't matter. I was Whitaker's clerk. I saw everything. The memos, the property lists, the meetings with Keene. I kept copies. Jared's heart pounded. Where are they? The man slid a flash drive across the desk. On here, enough to bury him. Before Jared could respond, the echo of footsteps filled the mill. Doors slammed shut. Black silhouettes appeared at the windows. The clerk's face went white. They followed me. Glass shattered. A gunshot rang out. The clerk crumpled, blood blooming across his chest. Jared dove for cover, returning fire. The flash drive clutched in his fist. The mill erupted into chaos. Bullets ricocheted off metal beams, sparks raining. Jared crawled low, firing calculated shots, dropping 2 silhouettes. He sprinted for the back exit, lungs burning, heart pounding. Tires screeched outside, more backup closing in. Jared hurled himself through a side window, crashing onto dirt, rolling hard. He staggered up, sprinted into the tree line, and vanished into the night. The flash drive was still in his hand. The clerk's blood still stained his jacket. He had the evidence now, but at a cost. Meanwhile, Elena sat in her dark kitchen, listening to the clock tick. Her children slept upstairs, blissfully unaware. She stared at Whitaker's folder, the one accusing her of theft. She knew it was fake. Priya knew it was fake. But the court didn't care about truth, only perception. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Give up custody voluntarily, and the charges vanish. Fight, and you'll lose everything. Tears slid down her face. She whispered to herself, "They can take my reputation. They can take my money, but not my children." And she made a vow she would not bow. Not to Whitaker, not to Keene, not to anyone. The next morning, Jared barged into Priya's office, flash drive in hand. His eyes were wild, his jacket still stained. "This is it," he said, slamming the drive onto her desk. Every memo, every transaction, Whitaker's handwriting, Keene's kickbacks, payments funneled through Silverwood Holdings. Enough to destroy them all. Priya plugged it in. Files spilled across her screen. Undeniable, damning. Her lips parted. This isn't just Maplewood corruption. This ties into state contracts, federal grants. Jared, this is massive. Jared's jaw clenched. And it ends today. The courthouse buzzed louder than ever. Protesters waved signs, media vans lined the street, and armed officers guarded every entrance. Inside, Elena stood tall at her table, Priya beside her, Jared in the gallery. Whitaker entered, but his usual smirk was gone. His face was pale, his eyes darting nervously. Priya stood. "Your Honor, before proceedings continue, we submit newly uncovered evidence of judicial misconduct. Exhibits are through Z." She handed the clerk a thick binder of printed files. Whitaker's hand shook as he flipped through. His face drained of color. This is inadmissible," he stammered. "No, Judge," Priya said firmly. "This is the truth, and the truth is admissible everywhere." The gallery erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Whitaker slammed his gavel, but the crack which sounded hollow now, desperate. The bailiff entered, whispering in Whitaker's ear. His face froze. Jared knew that look. Warrants had been issued. The DOJ had moved faster than Whitaker anticipated. The doors opened again and federal agents streamed in. Cameras clicked. Shutters flashing like fireworks. Judge Daniel Whitaker, an agent announced, "You are under arrest for corruption, fraud, and conspiracy." Gasps filled the room. Elena's breath hitched. Whitaker's gavel slipped from his hand, clattering uselessly on the floor. The robe that once shielded him now looked like a costume. Whitaker was led away in cuffs, his silver hair disheveled, his smirk replaced by a hollow stare. Keene was arrested hours later at his office, dragged out in front of stunned employees. The news spread like wildfire. Maplewood had never seen anything like it. Neighbors hugged Elena on her porch, tears in their eyes. Donations poured in. Priya's inbox filled with messages from mothers across the state. "Thank you for standing. Thank you for showing us we're not alone." But for Elena, the victory was quieter. She sat with her children at the kitchen table that night, their laughter filling the house, no longer shadowed by fear. For the first time in years, she felt free. Jared stood outside the courthouse steps the next day, watching crews take down the police tape. He thought of Mr. Lewis, the janitor who vanished. He thought of the clerk who died in the mill. Corruption never falls without casualties, and justice is never clean. But he also thought of his sister, mocked, humiliated, and yet unbroken. He thought of her children, safe now. And he realized that sometimes justice doesn't come from badges or gavels or titles. Sometimes it comes from ordinary people who refuse to stay silent. Elena returned to court weeks later, not as a defendant, but as a victor. Custody of her children was secured. The false charges evaporated. Her case became a landmark, cited in reform debates across the state. The same courtroom where she'd been mocked now echoed with her courage, and the lesson lingered long after the cameras left. Power mocks the vulnerable because it assumes they are alone. But when the vulnerable find their voice and their allies, power crumbles. So, dear viewer, as Maplewood fades into the distance, I leave you with this. How many Alinas are out there today? Mothers, fathers, workers, mocked and dismissed because of their struggle. And how many of us will choose to be Jared, the ally who refuses to let injustice stand unchallenged? Because justice isn't just decided in courtrooms. It's decided by whether we choose to stand or stay silent.